Ciao.
It says sponsored by Remote HQ. Collaborate like you're in the same room. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. That's Remote HQ.
Now and Goldie Hawn starring Cactus Flower tomorrow at 5 on Channel 2.
There's only one.
Says it happened on Friday in convenient Monday form. Yeah, Ken Ray is here with us, everybody. Ken Ray, he of macOS Ken, he of macOS Ken Live, and he of In a Few Minutes. macOS Ken Live is a bit like In a Few Minutes without other people, which I will prove here coming up in just a moment. It was a weird show on Friday, interesting show on Friday, and it led me to what I want to do for this week's conversations on In a Few Minutes. The problem is it left me to that a little bit later than I would have liked. So the plan this week is to talk to 5 different people, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, minus 1, about Apple's relatively recent past and maybe delve into the future as well. Now, I say we're talking to 5 people minus 1 because the first one is me. It was actually the conversation that I had for macOS Ken Live with people on Friday that made me decide on this past and future thing. macOS Ken Live on Friday honestly was very In a Few Minutes. And so for those of you who've heard Friday's macOS Ken Live, I apologize. This is kind of... No, it's not kind of a repeat, it's a repeat. For people who haven't heard it, though, this will actually set up the rest of what I plan to do this week on this show. And it'll also give you some idea of how macOS Ken Live tends to go. I think it seemed obvious when I started macOS Ken 15 years ago. It was obvious that it was all leading to talking about a new Snoopy series. It's kind of crazy. The new Snoopy series, The Snoopy Show, premiered on Apple TV Plus today. And yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's part of what we're talking about. It's not really what we're talking about, but it is where we're going to start. Because I got up and, was listening to some other show. And then I started checking Apple News. And it turns out that Apple has turned over the landing page of apple.com to promotion for The Snoopy Show. Shouldn't be surprising. Also, I should just go to the Apple site the first thing every day. Because now I got to say, I read it in Apple Insider, which is fine. That's a good enough a place as any, except really I should have seen it first. But I didn't. Apple Insider saw it and told me about it. So they have that show, which we talked about here. I want to say it was fairly early in macOS Ken Live that they announced that they were making a Snoopy series. Because, of course, Apple had already done... I think it was Peanuts in Space and Snoopy in Space. They won an award for one of those. I think it was Snoopy in Space. I'm not sure. They also secured the rights to all of the holiday specials, like Be My Valentine, Charlie Brown, which I think is the one about the little red-haired girl, is up on Apple TV Plus now. They put Happy Thanksgiving or a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown and the Charlie Brown Christmas up on Apple TV Plus as well, which of course caused a lot of people to be really upset because they thought they would never be able to watch them. And you can go back through the holidays if you want to see how that whole thing went. It was sometime maybe in October, September or October of 2020, which was only 8 years ago, that they announced that they were going to be making a new Snoopy series. And today is the day that it hits. And honestly, there's so much stuff happening on Apple TV Plus, you'll forgive me for forgetting, but I did, that it was coming out today. Apple's not going to let you forget, though, because if you go to apple.com, which I guess we all should every day, Snoopy's all over the thing. Snoopy and Woodstock. Top of the page shows a banner for the show, plus an animated dancing Snoopy. Then as you scroll down to the different products that normally feature on the front page, they got Snoopy all over them. Like, there are all the iPhone 12s right there, except Snoopy is sitting atop the iPhone 12 flying like he does when he is the World War I ace, like he does on top of his doghouse. Go further down a bit, the iPad Air actually is got We got Woodstock and a bunch of those little tiny birds that Woodstock is, carrying an iPad Air, apparently showing how light it is and airy, I suppose. HomePod's got a little dancing Snoopy next to it and a dancing Woodstock and a bunch of little animated musical notes. And then finally, of course, there's the ad for Apple TV that's always at the bottom except on the screen. Not Servant. Not upcoming shots from Cherry. It's Snoopy. He's underwater. He's, swimming around and stuff. Now, obviously, since I forgot this was coming, I haven't watched much of it yet. I watched 2/3 of the first episode, but that's kind of like watching 4 episodes or 3 episodes, because at least the first episode doesn't have a plot. It's not like the movies, which I was going to start naming, but that's embarrassing. I'll do it. Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown, Bon Voyage, Charlie Brown, Snoopy Come Home. Doesn't have a plot like that. Doesn't have a plot like all the specials I mentioned earlier. It's Flag Day, Charlie Brown, and Happy St. Patrick's Day, Charlie Brown. Those aren't really... Doesn't have a plot like that. Rather, it's got a bunch of little stories, little segments, which it makes sense because you're programming for kids, right? And not to sound all old man, but kids these days, I don't know that they're sitting and watching 30-minute shows. Although, Wolfwalkers and things like that. I mean, there are longer, whatever. Maybe they did it because they couldn't think of a plot. Maybe the next one's going to have a plot. I don't know. These were little vignettes, basically. So the first one is kind of an origin story. Actually, the first 2. The first 5 minutes or so is how Snoopy became Charlie Brown's dog. The second 5 minutes or so is how Woodstock became Snoopy's best friend. It's a great story, actually. It was pretty much Woodstock wanted to be Snoopy's friend. Just that simple. And then it's Charlie Brown trying to figure out what makes him smile. Spoiler alert, it's going to be Snoopy. It's right in the title. So, yeah, it's getting fairly well reviewed, I guess. Like I say, I kind of enjoyed it. I mean, what I liked about it is it wasn't offensive. You know how if there's something that you like when you're a kid, they reboot the thing, and all of a sudden, it stinks because they're trying to appeal to a new generation. And so all the stuff you liked about it is gone, but then now it's just like every other cartoon. It's weird to me, actually, because he's still the World War I flying ace in this. Now, Snoopy is 50 years old, 50-something years old, right? Maybe even a little bit older than that. So at the time that they introduced the idea of the World War I flying ace, World War I was only 50 years ago. It's over 100 years ago now, and yet he's still a World War I flying ace. But here's the thing. It's a dog flying a plane. Well, it's a dog flying a doghouse that he's pretending is a plane. And so it's fine. Kids don't have to know anything about World War I to hey, look, it's a dog flying a plane. I didn't know anything about World War I when they were, pushing it to me when I was 8. Pushing it to me, I'm sorry, when I was thoroughly enjoying Snoopy and Peanuts when I was 8. Talk about him being in the French Foreign Legion. Is that still a thing? Do any kids know about that? But it doesn't matter because you're watching the cartoon and it's oh, look, he's running around, I guess, being French foreign. It's weird because they haven't really retooled it that much. Nobody, at least in the first, episode, like I say, I haven't watched the whole thing, but nobody's walking around with cell phones. Nobody's walking around with iPads. The classroom looks like the classroom that it's always looked like. They're just making more. They're not remaking. They're not rebooting. They're just making more of it, which, it's worked for 50 some odd years. So, okay. I'll be curious to see what they say about viewership, if they ever do. Carlton Max says the Snoopy Show will charm children and de-stress adults. Okay, yes, that happened to me for 10 minutes. And Apple Insider says the Snoopy Show brings back the Peanuts of the past. That's what I was saying. Nobody's texting. It's just Charlie Brown and Lucy and, Pigpen and all the rest of them. I'm not going to sit here and name them all. I'll bet I could. I don't think I knew how much I actually knew about Peanuts until we started talking about it. dog who is decades old to the last decade and a half for Apple, we'll look at what in the last 15 years was a notch as far as the Cupertino company is concerned. But first, a word from Remote HQ, letting you collaborate as if you were in the same room. You know, this time last year, working together was easy. It was as easy as pulling up a chair, sharing notes, leaning in, and looking over somebody's shoulder. We might get back there at some point, but that point is not now. Now, we need new tools to give us that togetherness. And Remote HQ can be those tools. Remote HQ gives your group access to the kind of things you'd have if you were together. A whiteboard anybody can write on, a shared web browser anybody can control, notes that anybody can add to, plus access to apps your team's already using like Google Docs, Miro, Dropbox, and others. So even if you can't be together, you can work together like you're together. Try it out. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. Give Remote HQ a try. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. I joked earlier that it seemed obvious when macOS Ken started in 2006 that we would eventually be talking about a Peanuts series being produced by Apple. What I was trying to think about is, because every now and then I get a little weirded out by how much stuff, well, sometimes I get weirded out by how much stuff I should know, and then sometimes I get weirded out by how much stuff I'm going to have to know at some point. Like when I started macOS Ken in 2006, what do I care about cars? I think there had occasionally been talk. There would be talk that one day Apple might make an inboard infotainment system for a car, maybe, which of course they've done with CarPlay. I mean, that's de rigueur now. I don't have it. If I were buying a stereo today, it would definitely have it. Or if I were buying a car today, it would definitely have it. I mean, I don't have it because I don't have a car, of my own. But I mean, there was nobody I remember in 2005, I think a couple of friends saying, boy, it'd be neat if they made a car. That was it. Nobody thought they were actually going to make a car. And now I know the name of the guy who works for Morgan Stanley, who covers cars, because now he's talking about Apple, which means I'm going to be talking about it as well, which is crazy. I went through a list of things really quickly. Do these things make sense? If you had said 15 years ago, does it make sense to you that Apple is going to do this? Well, I got a few right here. Apple Pay or Apple Card, I'm going to say pass. I think we had PayPal at that point. And, the idea that you would be able to shoot money from your phone to somebody else's phone, I honestly don't remember if that was already a thing in Japan and China. I don't remember if that was a thing in Europe at that point. I mean, certainly we had the idea of online payment systems. Was there any reason to think that Apple would get into it? No, but I mean, there was no reason to think that we wouldn't be going to the bank and taking money out of the ATM in 2002, 2003. So I kind of want to say pass on the payment thing. I also kind of want to say pass on the App Store, because 15 years ago, we didn't have an iPhone. We had the Mac. We had, I still remember going to the Apple Store and looking at the wall of software. I remember going to, not Office Max, what was it, CompUSA, and looking at the rows and rows and rows of software. Would the App Store have made sense? I don't know. I kind of want to say pass on that as well. It would be easy to sit here now and say, oh, of course, that would make sense. I'm trying to remember if it was actually stuff that we thought about or talked about. Like music. I remember in 2005 talking with Scott Shepard at Inside Mac about, I don't understand why Apple is not getting into subscription music, but I was a subscription music adherent. I was paying Rhapsody $10 a month. Then I was paying Rhapsody $10 a month in 2005 to be able to have access to all the music in the world, or all the music they had anyway. So yes, music absolutely made sense to me. I've got resounding yes down here on that. Apple getting to the phone. I know I thought so by 2006 because I made a stupid video on YouTube called "Where is my iPhone?" And there weren't any yet. And I'm not saying I had the whole thing pegged, but yes, that definitely made sense to me. Does iPad make sense? Sure. Yes. I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey. They were walking around with iPads. They were a different form factor and they didn't do quite as much, but they were walking around with iPads. And that was in 1968. Of course, they were fiction, but yes, that was one of those things that if anybody's going to get into tablets, Apple ought to be the one to get into tablets, because we had seen tablets before, but they were bulky and clunky and slow. When do we get the iPhone? Got the iPhone in 2007, got the iPad in 2010. 3 years later especially, yes, it makes sense. As far as form factor, are they going to do a tablet? I don't know that anybody would have absolutely said, yes, they're going to do a tablet, but the second you say they're going to do a tablet, does it make sense? Resounding yes. Apple Watch. This one's kind of fun. 2006, yes, Apple Watch makes sense. 2010, no, Apple Watch doesn't make sense. I remember when Tim Cook introduced the Apple Watch in, 2015? Forgive me for not remembering. Was it introduced in 2014, came out in 2015? Or introduced in 2015, came out in 2016? I don't remember off the top of my head. I may be off by a year on those numbers. Might have been a tiny bit earlier than that. But when Apple Watch came out, I was talking to August Trometer. And he was talking about the way that Tim Cook held his hand up in victory, held his fist up in victory, because they were introducing this thing. And August wasn't certain that they had actually done anything victorious at that point. Now, August, I believe, is on his third Apple Watch. So, and I don't think you would mind me telling you that. So obviously he's about it now. The thing is, in 2006, if you had said Apple Watch, it'd be like, oh, that would be interesting and intriguing, and I would love to see that. Not a definite they should, but, I'd be curious to see what they did. By 2010, most everybody I knew had stopped wearing a watch because we all had our cell phones, and our cell phones did so much more than that. The one drag is when you were checking the time, people knew because you were looking at your phone. But the watch was not a thing. I mean, I think I probably still had one someplace, but the watch was not a thing that I carried anymore, was not a thing that I wore anymore, because it was replaced by the phone. And then Tim Cook comes out and they're like, yeah, we're going to make watches make sense again. I wasn't sure. And yet I'm on my second one. So let's do the last one, TV. Did Apple going into TV make sense 15 years ago? Not exactly. I mean, 15 years ago, if somebody said Apple's going to go into TV, would it have made sense? And my answer is not exactly. I mean, they had the video iPod at that point. So the idea of them making their own content wouldn't have been completely insane, but it wouldn't have made sense. And if I'm 100% honest, I don't know if it makes sense now. It's fine. I mean, they can, because they've got all the money in the world to do that. I know I've said here before, I was on Chuck Joyner's show when we started to hear the rumor that Apple was going to buy Beats. Or maybe they had already bought Beats, I'm not sure. But I mean, it was within a week of them buying Beats. And there was already starting to be talk that they were going to go into producing their own content at some point, that they were going to go into producing their own video stuff. And I don't know why in our heads, because it's been a few years now, that was tied to the Beats acquisition. And yet, Chuck put the question to us, what do you think of the idea? And I did not say, and I won't pretend like, well, it's obvious they're going to do that. What I said at the time was, why not? Because they've got enough money, and they weren't the most valuable company in the world at the time, but they had enough money that they could play with it. And I am a fan of Apple going off and playing, because then they give us stuff that we can play with too. And that's not the worst thing in the world. Hey, maybe, goofy glasses could be. What are we going to be talking about in 15 more years? That's kind of crazy to think about. I'll go ahead, and I know I've planted this flag here and other places as well. Apple in healthcare. And I don't just mean devices. I mean Apple in healthcare in an appreciable way. A trip to the hospital may not be, let me see your iPhone. It might be much more integrated, I would think. But I don't know if that's actually something that's going to happen or just what I want to see. But that's definitely something that I want to see. And with that, the stage is set for the rest of the week. The plan is to reach out to a few friends and get their ideas on what has wowed them over the past 15 years, what has surprised them, and maybe what they want to see going forward. That's all coming up in a few minutes. Keep it locked in.